All right, let's just look at those videos at the end of the session. I'll begin by introducing our speaker. Today we have with us Ingeborg Wolan, who will talk about distributed newsrooms, a very urgent need of the hour. Ingeborg is the editor for publishing strategy and visual journalism at Dagens Næringsliv. I hope that pronounced that correctly. Norway's most prominent business newspaper. She is an online news veteran who foresaw the possibilities of reaching audiences better online. She is passionate about understanding news users and letting their needs shape journalism. Among other roles, Ingeborg has previously worked as the first head of social media at the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation and led the NRK Beta Innovation Crew. I'd like to request all our attendees to post their questions in the Q&A box, and I now welcome Ingeborg.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for pronouncing the name of my newspaper so perfectly. It's such an honor to be able to join a conference in India from my own home office. This is a real treat. So thank you so much for inviting me to the Indian Media Leaders Summit. Let's see if I can get my screen shared here, and we'll get started. There we go. Can you see my screen okay? I think so. I've been asked to think ahead for a few months into the possibly post-pandemic situation, whenever that may be, and thinking about what we're learning these days that we might be able to take into the future. But just a little bit about who I am. Well, you said a lot about who I am, but where I work. Dagens Næringsliv, or the Norwegian Business Daily, DN for short, is, like you said, it's a business newspaper, but it's kind of broad-angled. It's not strictly business. It's also very well renowned for an investigative and feature journalism-based newsroom, and have won the most Pulitzer Prizes in Norway, or the Norwegian equivalent of the Pulitzer. We're not very big. Norway is a small country, and no Norwegian newsrooms are big in the international sense. And we are mid to large size in a Norwegian context, with about 180 total staff, and the newsroom is about 110 people. And we are a legacy newspaper. We are 125 years old, but we are turning heavily towards digital and feature actually one of the world's most expensive digital subscriptions. So what we are really concerned about in this day and age is making sure that we develop the new digital content and the digital features to deserve the price point that we are asking from our customers. So the question for today is how the COVID-19 experience will change how we think about newsrooms in the future. And what do we learn today that we might be able to take into a more ordinary kind of news management situation? I've been working more or less from the home office since March. In Norway, we don't have a very hard pandemic situation right now. In Oslo, where we're based, we are back to about a 50% usage of our newsroom, or about our facilities. But we have been working remotely for about 6 months, and I have learned so much. I think the biggest thing I've learned is that we went through three sort of phases as a newsroom management, or as a media house management, where the first part was really about managing the crisis and keeping operations going while moving to the home office. If you had asked me in February whether or not we'd be able to put out a printed newspaper made out of people's kitchens or bedrooms or home offices, I would have laughed and said it was impossible. And then a month later, we demonstrated that we were perfectly capable of doing that. But it was also a really hard first couple of months about handling the impact on the advertising side of the business, cutting costs, making sure that we were able to respond to the most experience and interest in news ever seen in my lifetime, while in the same time spending less money, traveling nowhere, and basically being stuck behind our desks doing journalism. And I will say that phase 1 and phase 2 happened almost in parallel, and took us through probably mid-May. It takes some time to sort of settle into a feeling of, okay, I think we got a grip on this now. There are no more immediate problems to solve just to make sure that you get your journalism out. And then enters phase 3. And looking at today's pandemic situation, I'm really not sure when phase 3 will end, if ever. It's about going beyond the crisis handling and learning how to be creative, build culture, drive change when working remotely. And there are so many positive takeaways from the pandemic that I would never have thought. I'm an extreme extrovert, and newsrooms were sort of built for people like me. But I also manage a few teams that have really thrived working from their home office. This is a picture of one of them, our editorial development team. This is a designer and a developer, backend kind of coder, and a data journalist in our daily meeting last Friday. And what we found out really quickly is that for some kinds of people in the newsroom, the pandemic revealed how they would have liked to be working all the time. And we as managers have probably never given them the opportunity, because people will step up and get the work done. And for the introverts in the organization, or those slightly less extrovert than myself, a lot of them have been telling us that this is the best thing that ever happened to them. They are able to work focused, stay in flow, not get interrupted, and get more work done. So say the guy in the bottom left corner of this picture, who is a classical back-end coder kind of guy, who is perfect for the kind of journalism that he does. He says he's never been more effective. He's never had a better time at work. And I wouldn't have thought that being able to do a team culture or something like that would have been really possible without getting together. But it turns out that for a lot of people, working remotely is perfectly fine. And they are happy to do it for just about as long as they are allowed to. It's the same thing with some writers. It's not just a coder thing or a developer thing. It's not a tech guy thing. I spoke to one of our features writers, a woman who has been in the office twice since March. And she said she's never been happier. She's been out traveling to visit sources near Oslo, where you can go in one day. And then she's been going back to the home office and writing. And she says her work has been excellent, and she's been able to do it flexibly and on her own terms, and she's been thriving. So these are some of the things that we should take with us from the pandemic. But what we also figured out really quickly, even though moving to the home office, is that there are some obstacles that working from home really can't alleviate. The first part is breaking news, because working and running a breaking news operation in a digital day and age requires really, really quick collaboration and communication. And while a chat group or a Slack channel or even a live audio channel like some internet gamers use could be used as a communications tool for a breaking news newsroom, there is nothing that can beat actually seeing and hearing each other when any big story breaks and saying, oh, I got that one, you do that. And for managers as well, this is one of the two parts of the operation that we were never quite able to facilitate from home. So when we were able to start getting some people back in the newsroom, the breaking news desk and the coordination between managers were the first two things we prioritized. Because reporters doing longer stories, talking to sources, are more or less happy doing that from home, doing really quick breaking news and collaborating around which stories get published where, when, and how, and by whom. That requires more of the informal and verbal communication. The other part that has really been suffering, and I didn't really think about that until maybe May or June, is how hard it was to run a creative meeting, how hard it was to get people to pitch stories, how hard it was for those ideas to be developed that people normally just toss around the coffee maker, because we are, as people, really, really good at getting our work done in a solo setting. but being creative, that really means talking to people and bouncing ideas off of one another, and facilitating a good idea development process between, for instance, a photographer and a reporter and a newsroom manager is just not as good doing on screen. Or as in this picture down right, learning how to make a great podcast when you're all sitting in different rooms. It's really, really hard. So that's the things we end up missing. So these are sort of the highlights and the lowlights of working in a remote setting, as I see it. So the question is, what can we take away from it? And I think the newsroom of tomorrow will work quite differently, or possibly the newsroom of this fall and this winter and wherever, because we don't know how long the pandemic will go about. And we will, of course, need to adapt to whatever the contagion situation is at any given time. But I think that being able to have a few people at the office, we will always prioritize breaking news and production and the creative and social side of things. And the last part is what takes a conscientious effort from us as managers, is thinking about what do people actually need to thrive when this working remotely goes on for a long time. Because there are some things that you can keep doing from home or wherever, writing, editing, doing copy, and administration. For us as managers, I think we have learned that if we are to continue working in this way for a long time, or even as the new normal, caring for the employees' well-being is a very new challenge for managers when you can't see people in the eye. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us as managers, is learning how do I care for people when all I do is talk to them on a screen or on the phone. So I think finding new ways or new methods to make sure that your staff is doing okay and that we are doing all we can to take care of them and to make sure that they are actually thriving is a new challenge that we need to take seriously. The second question is more of a practical matter, and that is, if this home office situation goes on for a long time, do we as employers have a responsibility for the working conditions at people's home offices or wherever they are working? We are starting to see some issues where people get back pains or arm pains, or they need a bigger screen, or they need a better chair. And whether or not the newspaper or the publishing house is responsible for facilitating people's working conditions from home is a big question for the future. And the third and big question is, how can we build culture and drive change in a more flexible and strangely organized newsroom? Because the biggest challenge is not managing day-to-day operations. I think the COVID crisis has shown us that we are perfectly capable of running operations in a digital manner. But driving change, implementing a new strategy, building a culture, changing a culture, that requires more of a social element. It requires maybe bringing people in for socially distant seminars in smaller groups, or going out for meals in a socially distant setting. And I think we as managers need to think very carefully about this part of our roles, less of the managerial side and more of the leadership side of the job. So in conclusion, my prediction is that we will learn from this pandemic, and that the newsrooms of the future, whenever the post-pandemic future might occur, will be and look quite different. Because I don't think we will need the big office spaces. It's not about coming into the office and getting the work done or getting the assignments done. It's about coming into the office and bouncing ideas off each other. It's about driving culture. It's about learning what we need to do now to exceed expectations in the future, and how we can collaborate more. And I think there are a lot of things that we can do to learn more about doing these processes in digital settings, but I also think that we will be changing the physical setup of the newsrooms of the future. And there are those who say that the newsroom is dead. You will never need a physical newsroom again. And if all we did was manage, yeah, I think that would be possible. but seeing as the biggest challenge of the future is driving culture and facilitating change, I think the new newsroom is the big challenge of 2021. So I think those were my thoughts on the matter, and I'd be happy to discuss with you and take any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Ingeborg. That was very informative. We do have a few questions actually, and we have some time to take them. So we have a first question from an anonymous source. How does one ensure their mental health is not affected as a result of working in isolation?
That is a really big question. And I'm not sure that you can be sure. And I think people have really, really different needs. For someone as extroverted as myself, for instance, I was going crazy by week 2 of working from the home office. And what I had to do was talk to my boss about this and talk to my nearest colleagues about what can we do. So we did some, what should I say, we did some in-person social distance meetings, because for me, that in-person collaboration is very, very important. So a colleague of mine and myself, for instance, walked around a park discussing. And for me, that sort of little break in the monotony of the home office makes all the difference. But people are really different. So I think as for managers, it's really, really important that you have those one-to-one conversations with each individual, because some people are really, really happy and would rather not be bothered by their manager at all. I would not recommend that as an approach for everyone, and I would not recommend that you let them get their way always. But I think that we as managers learn to differentiate more between what different employees need in terms of social stimulus and feedback.
Right. We have another question. If you had the choice post-COVID, would your newsroom go back to the non-distributed style of working as before?
I think not as before, but to a certain extent. And what we are seeing right now, we are experimenting with a sort of 50-50, how many people are able to be in the newsroom on any given day. So we have a rotation going. And what we are seeing is that we are really prioritizing the collaborative things. So I think that in the future, I would be very, very happy to allow staff a lot more flexibility on choosing to work more from home, to choosing when in the day to do their work, as long as it gets done by their deadline. That the biggest challenge would actually be deciding how can we get the right people to get together in the office at the right time, to get the good ideas going, to get the culture changing in the way that we want to be. That sort of social interaction that breeds creativity and fosters change. And I think striking that balance between giving people more control and choice in how they do their work is the new big challenge for us as newsroom managers.
Right. All right, I think that's all the questions we have. Would you like to say something in conclusion, Ingeborg, before we play our video from our sponsors?
I would like to take the opportunity to thank you again for inviting me, and to share maybe one sort of reflection that I've made for myself during these past 6 months. And if there's one thing I think the management level in our newsroom has been thinking a lot more about in the past couple of months than we did ever before, is where do we stop managing and where do we start leading? And I think our role as managers has changed a lot from staying with the moment-to-moment assignments to making sure that the people know which direction they should be going and are able to make their own really good choices, and taking care of the employees. And so I think the leadership side of the job has become much more important. And I think we need to reflect more on what leadership means to each one of us and think less about management, because I think people, at least our people, have really proven that they are up to the job.
Right. We do have another good question actually. How does the distributed newsroom concept work for the print side of things?
Well, I run a print operation. So what we are seeing is that the print news desk, they are really happy to be working from home as well, as long as, well, thankfully, we invested in new production technology for the print process in the past few years. And we have a online-based print production system. So that means that our print desk was able to work from home. And if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would not have said that they were capable. They proved me so wrong. So our page or layout people and our copy editors are really, really happy being undisturbed at home. But the print assignment editor is one of the people that we have chosen to keep in the office, because he or she needs to interact with the online publishing editor and the breaking news editor and decide which stories go for print. So I think it's a matter of, do you need to collaborate with someone really constantly, or do you need to get your work done? And I will say that having a chat group for the people in the desk operation has been remarkable, because you can recognize the sort of sense of humor that they used to have in the newsroom. It comes back in writing. It's really, really funny. So they are able to adapt quite beautifully as long as we have the technology for them to do so.
Right. It seems that there are a lot of last minute questions. So I'll take one last question from this question is from, just quickly. Yeah, it's from Sundaraman R, and he says, what kind of cultural change was required at DN, and did it start before COVID?
Yes, we have started a cultural change 2 or 3 years ago towards a more digital, less paper-driven or less print-driven operation, a more innovative operation. And we have invested in technology and analytics to be able to facilitate more digital processes. And I think both the culture change and the technology change has helped us do this so much more easily than we could have done previously. Like I said, the print operation 2 years ago would not have been possible to do from home. 1 year ago, it would have been practically impossible. Now we were able. And it's about both teaching new tools and having new tools and learning new processes. I'm really, really glad that we didn't have to do that this spring, because I think that would have been the cause of our print edition not coming out. And we have not had one single day of not producing a print newspaper due to COVID. But yeah, we have had staff training and management training going on for the last couple of years. And I think that has helped us, but I do not think it has fully prepared us for what was to come, that we had to handle as it happened.
Of course. Well, thanks, Ingeborg, for that lovely discussion and answering the questions. Let me again thank our sponsors, Google News Initiatives, TiVo DX, PPI and Art Pushup, and let's see if we can play those 2 videos now.
Hi, PPI Media has been automating newspaper production around the world for 35 years and is shaping the future of the publishing industry together with more than 100 customers from India and all over the world.
And if you're interested in how our new publishing platform can help you to save costs and produce securely even in times of crisis, then register now for our live webinar on October 26th at the URL shown below. Stay safe.
Web publishing is a tough business. You're always juggling between creating content, growing traffic, and turning a profit. It can all quickly become overwhelming. That's why we built Ad Pushup. Ad Pushup is a revenue optimization platform that can help you grow your revenue by using ad layout testing, header bidding, ad block monetization, new ad formats, and bid price optimization. We will increase demand for your website by connecting you to 30,000 advertisers via 50 exchanges. We optimize 50 billion impressions every year for 300 plus publishers, including Reddit, CNET, FileHippo, and NDTV, delivering an average revenue growth of 40%. Ad Pushup is a Google partner, IAB member, and backed by strong investors, including Microsoft Ventures. So you're in safe hands. Want to learn more? Request a demo today.
All right, so with that, I'll bring our first session to a close. I want to thank our audience for being extremely patient while we handle the technical issues that we were facing. To join the next session, please go back to your timeline and click on the join button on the next session. And we've tried making this conference as interactive as possible. So we've got an exhibition hub and we've got a meeting hub where you can interact with the exhibitors and chat with your fellow attendees. So please try to make full use of that. And thanks for joining us today. Thank you.